So, to get started, how would you describe survival mode?
I think the first word that comes into my mind is exhaustion. When you're in survival mode, you're exhausted and blinded. And I remember thinking that it was normal, but it's not. So if you are feeling exhausted all the time, that you can't catch a break, just know that it's not normal and that you're in survival mode.
I agree. The exhaustion once in survival mode is almost endless until you are able to pretty much take that radical ownership of your life and make a shift. Welcome to Survival Mode Disrupted, the podcast for those who are done performing, done people pleasing, and done living life on autopilot. I'm your host, Letitia, the Survival Mode Disruptor, and this is where we create disruptive, unapologetic transformations for those who are ready to exit survival mode and reclaim their power. Every episode is your permission slip to burn the rule book, break the cycle, and finally build a life that feels like yours. So let's disrupt everything that's holding you back and start living life on your own terms. This is your trigger warning. This podcast is raw. It is real and it doesn't sugarcoat what it means to survive trauma, abuse, mental health battles, or even the aftermath of living in survival mode for too damn long. What you hear on Survival Mode Disrupted includes unfiltered stories, graphic details, and a vulnerable truth that may trigger some of the audience. Please prioritize your emotional safety. If something feels too heavy, pause, breathe, come back when you're ready, or not at all. Your healing is yours to honor. These episodes are based on lived experience, not therapy sessions or clinical advice. Listening does not replace mental health treatment or constitute a coach client relationship. If you're in crisis, please seek immediate help from a licensed professional or contact your local emergency services. This space is built with care, but it's also built for truth and built for disruption. Take what you need, leave the rest, and most of all, trust yourself. If this podcast speaks to your soul, you don't have to do this work alone. Feel free to join our free Facebook community for high achieving women ready to break cycles and heal out loud. Join us at Disrupting Survival Mode on Facebook, or grab the book that started this movement, Exiting Survival Mode, raw step by step guide to help you identify, release, and rebuild from the survival patterns that have been keeping you stuck. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Survival Mode Disrupted. I am your host, Letitia, the Survival Mode Disruptor, and today we have Louisa with us. So, Louisa, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Letitia. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Louisa, and I'm a strategic business growth consultant, also a trauma survivor, child trauma survivor who has grown out of survival mode and in thriving mode.
Oh, exciting. I can't
Mhm.
wait to hear your story. So, first of all, thanks for being here. We connected in like a podcast group, right?
Mhm.
So, I'm really
Yes.
excited to get to know a bit more about you. So,
Mhm.
tell us your story to and through survival mode, Louisa.
Oh man, Letitia. So it's a long story. I'm gonna keep it as short as possible. So I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, in the inner city. So people hear Brooklyn and think, oh my gosh, nice, fancy, Dumbo. No, I was in the hood in Bushwick, which is gentrified now. And I felt like, well, I know that I was already born into survival mode because was raised by parents who also had trauma and also were in survival mode and didn't know anything better. So I can remember from the age of 6 knowing that I had to be aware of everything happening around me. I had to be aware of playing in the park. I couldn't just go play in the park. without wondering, oh, is there going to be a gang shooting? Is someone going to take me? We had pedophiles there. I also was sick, having to worry about whether my mom was going to snap and I would get the daylights beat out of me, right? I had to worry about whether my sister was in a good mood or my little brother was doing okay, right? So these are things that now that I have kids of my own, that I'm like, oh, that definitely wasn't normal. You should be able to play freely. So grew up in that environment. I was also unfortunately sexually abused starting at the age of 6, from 6 to 11. And that was something that I thought was normal. But there's something that your body kind of tells you, like you think it's normal, but somehow you just kind of know something is off, or you just kind of go with the flow. So I kept at it. I became a very ambitious person, which kind of worked in my favor because now I own my own business. But I was very ingrained into the hustle culture. I'm going to work hard. I'm not going to rest. I'm going to do all the things. Anything you can do, I can do better. Right. So that was the mindset I had into get into life, surviving. I made it into the corporate world. And as a Black woman in corporate New York, you could imagine how that all played out. It was difficult to be taken seriously. However, I would say being in survival mode and not knowing any better, I didn't do myself any favors, because the minute someone said something I didn't like, oh, you're going to listen to what I have to say, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you you don't mess with me. And I gave that angry Black girl vibe. And I can't even be mad that I was labeled the angry Black girl nowadays. Back in the days, nowadays, you label me that, it's like, no, 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 I'm not. I'm assertive, as we discussed before. By that age, so I grew up survival mode. I started age 6, kept at it as a teenager, entered the corporate world at age 19. By the age of 25, I met my husband. No, actually, that's not true. At the age of 23, I met my husband. And that's when I learned, oh, wow, there's a better way of living. He is white, completely different mindset. And there would be things that I would tell him, like, oh, I did this and did that. And then you got that look in the face, like, wait, what? What? You did what? And then that's when I started unraveling things and realizing, hey, what happened to me as a child wasn't normal. Me being afraid of my mom beating the crap out of me wasn't normal. Me being in a park thinking that I'm gonna get shot and actually having to run in the middle of gun shooting, of gun violence, that's not normal. Me knowing that if you're in a park and there's a shooting, you have to really analyze, like, okay, if I run, is this the best thing to do because I can get caught by a stray bullet? Maybe right now it's best for me to go and lay under a park bench, which has happened before. That's not normal. Me being anxious about all the things, the feeling of your heart always racing, you always being on alert. That's it's not normal. You shouldn't have to live that way. And honestly, coming to that realization was great, but also hard, because there's this grief that comes with realizing, wow, I didn't have a normal childhood. I didn't have the best childhood. I didn't have a good childhood. And even me saying that vocally, saying I didn't have a good childhood, that took a lot of work for me to do, because of course I want to honor the hard work that my parents did. They tried their best given their circumstances. And of course I don't want to bash their name or any of that. But the fact of the matter is I didn't have a good childhood, because of me always having to survive and make it through on my own. Another thing with surviving is also learning to let people in. I think for me, which now as a mom, I look at my kids and I'm like, wow, it's kind of cool that we have this relationship where they can lean on me. Something part of my traumas was I didn't have anyone to lean on, because mama didn't raise no punk. You're gonna rise up, you're gonna do what you gotta do. You don't need nobody, right? And as a child, it should, even as an adult, you need community, you need people. So that's in a nutshell, and keeping it as short as possible, my story of survival. Oh, and I forgot one part of this whole survival journey. I was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which was a tough pill to swallow, literally and figuratively, because now I'm on antidepressants. Yes, I'm a Black woman on antidepressants. But that was hard to come to terms with, but it was also liberating because it's like, wow, okay, I do have a condition. I'm not crazy and I can get through this.
Thanks for sharing. And I related to a lot of what you said, right? Like I often talk about how unprotected I was as a child. The things
Mhm,
that I went through, I shouldn't have been went through. Neither one
mhm,
of my parents protected me effectively. And it's not that they were horrible people. They were both present. Well, my mom was primarily present. My daddy came in and out of my life. But I in my healing, I had to be honest, right? Like I couldn't sit back and say, yeah, they were great parents because 90% of what I went through as a child was a direct result of not being protected by my parents. And my healing has brought me to a place of grace.
mhm,
They did the best that they can with the information that they had at the time, particularly my mama. I don't believe that for my father. And it allowed me to forgive her. But then there was also a level of accountability from her perspective. And I think in the Black community in particular, we don't always get that accountability, right? Like the things that happen either get swept under the rug or you're kind of just told to forget about it because people don't want to address the issues because it means that they
yep.
kind of have to turn it inwards. And a lot
Mhm,
of us in our community avoid turning it inwards because it's just much easier placing the blame on others. But one of the things that I've noticed about having these conversations, I can always tell the level of healing based
mhm,
on someone's response to the people that might have put them in difficult circumstances. And when I hear that level of grace being applied, I'm like, okay, that done
mhm.
the work. You know what I mean? Because
Yes.
so many of us sit in that blame game. I went through this as a child, and this is why I am the way that I am. And yes, that is the reason. But as an adult, our responsibility is to heal. Like we can't be 50 something still blaming our parents for what our life looks like today, right?
Mhm,
As easy as it can be, trust me. But I'm curious for those who don't understand CPTSD in its
mhm.
entirety, how did that manifest for you?
Okay, so it so CPTSD is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's a form of PTSD. So most people associate PTSD with a one single event. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is essentially it's complicated, long series of events. The way it manifested for me, so I moved from Brooklyn and I moved to Canada, Vancouver, Canada with my husband. And I thought this is my happily ever after. And yes, I'm gonna be a cornball and be like, yeah, I found my prince. I got me a white. I've always been into white men. Let me tell you, blonde hair, blue eyes. That was me. My husband's blonde hair, blue eyes, and I'm like, yes, I made it. I'm gone. And as I was leaving, I'm like, I am leaving all this nonsense behind. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. I reference it often when I talk about my trauma. I didn't know about this book back then, and I didn't know that the body kept the score. What happened was I started getting nightmares in the middle of the night. And I would wake up thinking my mom was in my room, like clawing and beating the crap out of me. Well, specifically clawing my face. There was an incident. I was 23 years old. That was the last time she beat me. Now that I'm more mature, I'm like, it's assault because I'm an adult. And it was her clawing my face. That's what manifested. So I would wake up screaming, like, get off, get off. And then my husband's like, what the heck's happening? And I would kind of snap out of it. And then I just ignored it. Now I was in schools, I was studying community and human services, and I knew about psychology and I was learning about PTSD, and I was like, dang, I might have the PTSD. That's what I called it. But I'm a Black woman. No, I don't have a mental condition. Absolutely not. Well, I kept on ignoring it, and then suicidal ideation started coming about. Also, I wasn't sleeping because I was up in the middle of the night thinking someone was coming to get me. So I just carried on with life and tried to, I would say. And the turning point for me that I was like, I can't ignore this anymore was where I was driving and then I had a flashback and I was like, I am going to just end my life right now because I am worthless. I can't deal with these images and these flashbacks of my mom beating me. My mom didn't even love me, all these things. So what am I doing here? You think you can escape your past, Louisa? And I was literally going to just throw my car in a ditch and just run into a tree. And I got this splitting image of my husband just randomly in my brain, and he was just weeping uncontrollably. And that snapped me out of it. And I like slammed on the brakes. And I remember just like hypervent. It felt like a movie. I was hyperventilating. And I'm like, okay, I need to call Scott, who's my husband. I called him and I'm like, hey, I think I need help. I think I might need to go to therapy. And even me vocalizing that, I was so ashamed. I'm like, why would I, why do I need therapy? Why am I like this? I can't go to therapy. I'm not crazy. Also, thinking about my career, because I was doing community and human services, I wanted to be a social worker. Like, what does this mean for my career? Of course, that whole ambition. Like, here I am. I literally almost died, almost committed suicide. I'm like, I have to go to therapy and my career is going to come to an end. So I found a therapist who specialized in trauma.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget when I went and I told her, and she's like, okay, well, based on my credentials, I can't give you a diagnosis, but you have to go to a doctor and they have to give you medicine. And I was like, honestly, Letitia, I was like, oh, hell no. You trying to put me on meds? No, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. But I went to a doctor. They told me the inevitable and told me I had to be on meds. I explained to them that I didn't want to be on it. And then they told me, they're like, medication is not harmful. This is probably better than you living in a constant state of fight and fight mode. So that's kind of how that manifested. And then I did EMDR for a whole year and a half. And it was hellish, I'll tell you that much. And there was more things that came out and more things manifested. And I started learning more about myself and dealing with the things that I should have dealt with when I was a kid. I had to deal with it. And the whole inner child side of things too, like talking to my inner child and being the person protecting that little girl that should have been protected. So that's how that manifested. Yeah.
Mhm. I am in a space now where I'm learning more about EMDR. And for those who don't know, it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
And it's a trauma focused approach to helping people get unstuck, helping them regulate their nervous system and such, right?
Mhm.
Why do you think, and I always ask this, like, why do you think that worked versus traditional therapy for you?
I think it worked because it pulled out things that I didn't even remember. Because the brain has a way of protecting you, right? It just takes things, it just blocks off things, right? We started off with the typical like talk therapy, but how am I going to talk about something that I don't even remember happened, right? So we did the basic childhood, like child history, this is what happened or whatever. But my brain had protected me so much to the point that like I was abused for 6 years, from 6 to 11, I don't know, 5 years. I can't even remember that man's name. I saw him every day. He was my childhood's friend's grandpa. That's what I would just call him. And through EMDR, it's like, oh shoot, this was his name. I can remember a lot of the stuff that happened between my mom and dad. My dad passed away when I was 10, unfortunately, and even that wasn't handled properly. Like my dad had cancer, and I watched the progression of him. He was a 250-pound man, and when he died, he was 90 pounds. Yeah, and I was 10, and no one walked me through it at all. But I had blocked that off completely. And through MDR, I was able to remember the day I was told he had cancer and even reprocess that because as a 10-year, I don't know what the heck cancer is, but trying to rewire that into thinking, okay, but processing, okay, the cancers are actually a very bad thing. And at that point, he had terminal cancer. He found out he had cancer and then died 6 months later. So processing that, processing the grief, feeling the feelings that I should have felt when I was a kid or been walked through as a kid, being able to do that. I think if it would have been the traditional therapy, none of that would have ever come out. And even going back to remember myself as a little girl, right? Being able to, I don't want, it wasn't like I'm not a victim. I was a victim at that time, but being able to see the little girl in that sense and see that I was actually wronged because I took a lot of responsibility for all the things that happened to me, even being abused, like, oh, I probably shouldn't have worn that. My mom beating me, oh, I pushed her buttons. I probably shouldn't have pushed her button, right? But through EMDR, it literally takes you back to when you were that child. And I don't know, it's like an out of body experience. I can see myself as a child, but I can see myself as an adult and just hugging that little girl. So I think that's why that worked for me. Talk therapy wasn't going to go anywhere with me, to be honest. Can't talk about when I can't remember.
Exactly. And it's you brought up a few great points, right? Our brain is magnificent in the fact that it compartmentalizes things. Like I remember the first couple of times I started talking about my abuse, I actually felt like I was talking about somebody else because I had neatly packed it away, so that I could move on with my life, so that I wasn't kind of like stuck in this limbo of unknowing.
Mm-hmm.
But in order for me to heal, I had to process it. And oftentimes, what happens, our brain in its magnificence packs things away so tightly that
Mm-hmm.
unless we find another way to access that, those are triggers that go unhealed, those are memories that go unprocessed, and all of that is necessary in order for us to move forward. You also mentioned how like talk therapy wouldn't help because a lot of the stuff that you didn't remember. But also, I find that a lot of therapists aren't trauma informed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that creates another layer of issues for people who are actually seeking help. If you can't actually help me in
Mm-hmm.
the area that I need help, I end up re-traumatizing myself in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like talk therapy, yes, I'm gonna talk through this stuff, but I'm talking around in circles if you don't understand how to help me as a trauma
Mm-hmm.
survivor,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I love having conversations about different modalities and
Mm.
exploring why it works as opposed to
Yeah.
what we see in mainstream. Go talk to somebody. And of course, Black women, are you crazy? I have
Yeah.
been told since two. What happens in my house stays in my house, and you want me to come lay down on the couch and tell you all my business? It ain't happening.
Exactly. Exactly. So you want me to do what? And finding the therapist with the right modality is like crucial. And so it's actually funny you mentioned the whole like Black women thing. So both of my okay, so my first therapist, unfortunately, she passed away, but this was years after I've did EMDR. But she was white, but she was raised in Colombia. So she knew like Latin roots and stuff. And I'm like, this is how we work. My current psychologist also, she's a missionary kid and was in Latin America a lot. So that's how we work. Now, in between my first counselor passing away and me finding my current counselor, I had one counselor that came highly recommended from everyone in my community, which are just white girls. No offense to my white friends or any of that, but it's just a different vibe. And let me tell you, Letitia, the therapy was not work. Like she just wanted to talk. And how does that make you feel? And I'm like, stupid question. Like, do the therapist, like, help me, right? So I tried it out for a while and I'm like, this is not going to work. And I'm like, I have to keep looking, right? So it's really important to know that when you find a therapist, if it doesn't align, it doesn't align. No hard feelings. That's I'm sure this, well, clearly this therapist that didn't work for me is great because she came highly recommended. She works for some people. She doesn't work for me. That's totally fine. So it is okay to look around. If someone's not working out for you, then keep it moving. It's also okay to outgrow someone. Like, let's say you have this therapist and they've done great, and now you're just like, oh, I think I'm ready to move on. That's okay. It's also okay to go for tune-ups. That's what I call it with my therapist. Actually, she kicked me out because I would see her every week. And then she's like, okay, Louisa, I don't think you need to see me every week. And I was like, what do you mean? Who am I supposed to talk to? Hello? And she's like, your husband. And I'm like, I felt like she doubted me. I'm not even gonna lie. But I'm so glad that she did that because I'm not attached to her and I'm a big girl. I can do it, right? But I go back for tune-ups. Like if I'm feeling off or I need to run something by someone other than my husband, I be like, hey, can we book a session? And we pick up right where we left off, and then I go on my merry way, and I know that she's always there. So it's very important that you know that. You should graduate from your therapist essentially, but you should go back for tune-ups. And again, if it ain't working, it ain't working.
We aren't necessarily taught how to advocate for ourselves, taught how to align with what we desire, right? And it's similar to like you go to the doctor, you get examined, they tell you what you need, and it's either you do it
Mm-hmm.
or you don't. When it comes down to your healing, it is so personal that
Mm-hmm.
if you're not happy in those conditions, if you're not connecting with the person, you're not going to be completely vulnerable. You're not
Mm-hmm.
going to let your walls down. I remember after a suicide attempt in my teenage years, I went to therapists for 3 years, 3 times a week. And I tell people, yes, I went therapy, but I learned how to show up in that space, right? I learned
Mm-hmm.
how to tick the box because I knew I had to be here 3 times a week for Lord knows
Mm-hmm.
how long until I wasn't a minor anymore, right? Like it was
Mm-hmm.
forced on me by my mother. I was in an environment, you know, being raised in Bermuda, for those who don't know, 21 square miles, 60,000 people, it was probably 50,000 people at that time. Listen, your business got spread faster than the flu, and I don't care how professional people are. People
Mm-hmm.
knew that I was going to this therapist who was also a friend of the family. So it
Oh.
felt like, you know, a conflict of interest of all kinds. But I had to go. So I
Mm-hmm.
showed up in this space. I told her what I knew she wanted to hear, and then
Mm-hmm.
I left and went on about my business until the next appointment.
Mm-hmm.
Did I heal? No.
No.
I just sat in a circle of showing up as expected and being given very little tools as expected and just ticking that box. But now, as an adult, I respect representation. I respect going to people who actually get it. I don't want to
Yeah.
go to a GP when I need a specialist. And I
Mm-hmm.
think being able to honor what you need is
Mm-hmm.
the highest form of self-love, which oftentimes we don't always have as we enter our healing journey. But it's
Mm-hmm.
so important to consider ourselves in this process and not just do things to tick a box, not just do things because we think we have to. There is so much liberation in this healing process. And yeah, it may take a couple times to get it right, but you want to be seen and understood in a way that makes you feel whole
Mm-hmm.
so that you can get what you need out of the treatment that you're seeking.
Yeah, and I think in our community, we find it that it's selfish to be seen, to be heard, to ask for what you need because you just got to be grateful for what you got, right?
Mhm.
And it's not selfish. It's not. You need to be. able to speak on what you need. If not, you're not going to get it. And what is the point of going to therapy to check a box? Like you're wasting your time. Like
And
you're
money.
wasting and money, essentially. Like you're just throwing money down the drain. And I know so many people who have gone to therapy who are still in therapy, my mom included. She told me she was in therapy and I was excited. And then you kind of know who are the ones who are going and just checking the box and who is the one doing the work. And
Hmm.
I was kind of like, she's just going in there. She working as therapist. She working the system. And for her, it's a little in terms of money, it's she doesn't have to pay for it, right? So she just goes government funded or whatever, spends an hour chit-chatting of whatever she's chit-chatting. But it's actually quite sad because there's so much you could accomplish if you just go in there or find the right therapist who can not just tick the boxes off, but really unpeel the layers and layers of hurt and pain. Because when I think of my mom, although like right now we're no contact, and it's probably gonna be like that for a very long time. She's very rough around the edges, but I see as I can see how amazing she could be if she just peels off the layers and heal, right?
Hmm.
But you can't force someone to do the work if they don't want to, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
I remember being about 16 and my mom telling me a story of my paternal grandmother. And she was traumatized by whatever situation. And my mom said, up until the day she died, she talked about it like it happened yesterday. And I remember at one point during my healing, I was talking about the things that I went through like they happened yesterday. And oftentimes we don't recognize how much we hold on to our circumstances, how much comfort we get in holding on to our circumstances because of the attention we get when we do.
Hmm.
And being able to see that and make it make a shift, I think was a great thing for me. But I often sit back and I watch people. I've had potential clients that have come to me, and just by the conversation, I know that they're not really ready for the work. They're
Hmm.
ready to tell the story, but they're not
Hmm.
ready to do the deep dive that is needed in order to move forward. And everyone goes through that space, right? Where we kind of
Hmm.
hold on to our narrative. But whenever I talk about accident survival mode, I say it happens in three phases. The first is self-awareness. We can't change what we can't see. The second, I think, is probably the most important, and that's the reprogramming. Being able to change our narratives, being able to challenge our beliefs, being able to be honest with our thought
Hmm.
processes, right? And then the third is a reinvention. Oftentimes in this space, I hear, well, heal so you can go back to who you were before the trauma. But some of us, have been traumatized since, like you said, birth. So where are we going back to? Egg state? Like, like where are we going back to? Seriously. But I think, there's so much that happens in the healing process of accident survival mode that is so liberating so that we can take that radical ownership of ourselves. And it really just comes down to that accountability, like knowing that it's nobody else's responsibility to fix me,
Hmm.
and I
Yeah,
gotta do it. And so
yeah,
many people miss out on that, right? And then as we
yeah,
see, trauma gets passed on from generation to generation because people are just not anchoring
yeah.
into the healing process.
Yeah, and it's so sad as someone who has done the work and healed, like when you talk about the liberation of it, like it is amazing. And I, when you said the whole heal so you can go back to your old self, I was like, I don't even know what the heck that means. Like, but
Exactly.
yeah, but who I've become since I've healed, I love myself and I can sit, it sounds cocky. I'm a very humble person, but I love who I've become. I love the empathy that I've developed. I love the lens in which I can see things. I can see things differently. I went from being someone who was just set on her ways. I'm like, this is the way it needs to be, blah, blah, blah. And now, like, there's room for like learning and be like, well, maybe no, maybe no, it doesn't have to be that way. There's that subjection, right? And seeing people in horrible situations and not judging them. Even things with my mom, like she has hurt me greatly, but I look at her and I don't even hate her. I'm like, I actually feel bad for you and I really want you to heal. That's all I want for you is to heal because there's so much freedom in going from surviving to thriving. Like
Mhm.
it's so liberating and you make these amazing connections and you realize you're not alone and you can get on podcasts and speak about your story freely and not give a crap of who's listening, right? Because you have that desire for other people, right? And you can kind of, I've told people, I'm like, you gotta have a glow. You know your people. Like when someone's been through something, you have that conversation, you're like, you're my people. And you've done the work, you've healed. Like, let's connect, let's talk about it. And it's not like a bantering session, right? Like I can see her and smile and talk about my situations. Was it hurtful? Yeah, but I've healed. And those situations don't define who I am. Like my trauma doesn't define who I am. Unless we get real and I talk about who I am, you would never know that I was a traumatized, that I have
Mhm.
CPTSD, to be honest. If you see my kids, you wouldn't think that their mom has a mental health condition. You wouldn't. And that's because I did the work and I want that for so many other people. And even seeing you, like I think we got to connect a little bit more in one of those networking events. And I was like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
this is amazing, right? So it's this is so much freedom and healing.
Mhm. And you
Hmm.
find your tribe in healing, right? Like I
Hmm.
know like so many people, so many of us suffer in silence, but once we anchor into our healing, we find our people. And it's in the most random places like us. Like we were just on this networking event and then I was like, girl, and we had
Yep.
connected before that, but then, just sharing our stories, just connecting from that space of healing, it just changes everything. And that's why I started this podcast because I really wanted people to see not necessarily the multitudes of stories of trauma, but the
Mm.
fact that healing is possible and it looks
Mhm.
so different for everybody, but it's possible. And then what comes with that? Like almost every guest that I've had has this level of gratitude.
Mm.
They want to help other people. And I feel like that's what self-actualization actually is. Like
Mhm.
getting over all of the struggles and trauma and then being really willing and ready to reach a hand back and say,
Mhm.
listen, honey, I know this is hard, but hold on to me. I'm your
Yeah.
person in this moment. I can support you. I have
Mhm.
thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Louisa.
Me
So
too.
please tell me a bit more about how we can find you online and how you work with clients.
Okay, so you can find me on LinkedIn with as Louisa Thiessen. You can also find me on my website, www.adminvirtuosa, so it's virtuous with an A at the end, .com. And I work with clients. I help them one-on-one to build a business that's sustainable to them, emphasis on that, and build a business that helps them grow as a person and also make some money. And I tie in the mental health aspect of it. All of my business strategy keeps the mental health aspect of running a business with that in in the strategy.
Mhm.
I need some water. I'm just gonna keep it real. I'm like struggling here. Okay, much better. So those are my website links. I love to connect via LinkedIn. And if you don't have LinkedIn, I'm sure you can find me. Oh, wait a minute. I'm totally butchering this. You can find me on Instagram too. Duh. I have a personal link Instagram page. I don't have a business Instagram. You can find me at Louisa Marie Instagram. That's my handle. And I'd love to connect with anyone who not only has a business, but also has a story. Because as you can see, I'm very passionate about sharing our healing stories and journeys. And I just want to say we are funny people, us traumatized people. We are funny, and I love me a good laugh.
Me too, I can crack a joke that can be quite dark, but if you get it, you know where I'm coming from.
Yes, I
Like
love those
dark,
dark jokes.
dark.
It's actually funny when you want to make someone uncomfortable too. It's like I'm just gonna
They look
ruffle
at
some
me like,
feathers here.
how are you even laughing? I'm like, because it's fun.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes, so
Yeah.
before we wrap it all up, one key takeaway for the audience to action.
Do the work. Don't just, am I allowed to swear in this podcast?
Yes, girl.
Don't half-ass it. Do the work. That is the key takeaway. It is worth it, 110%.
And you're worth it. You are worth the
Mm,
work. Okay. So,
mhm,
Louisa, thank you so much for your time on Survival Mode Disrupted. And, audience, thank you for catching another episode. I just want to remind you, you were not built to break, but you damn
mhm.
sure were not built to just survive. Disrupt the cycle, reclaim your life, and thrive on your own terms. And I will see you next week.
Bye.
Once again, thank you for joining another episode of Survival Mode Disrupted, hosted by the Survival Mode Disruptor, Letitia. You didn't land here by accident. This conversation, it probably cracked something open on purpose. Because survival mode isn't just a phase, it's a pattern, an identity, a prison masked as strength. But here's the truth, you're not broken, you're just unfinished. So if something stirred in you today, don't ignore it, don't numb it, move with it. And I want to once again invite you to join Disrupting Survival Mode, the Facebook community where healing is loud and messy and real. I also want to invite you to buy my book, The Survival Mode Exit Plan, because your breakthrough deserves a blueprint. And if you felt seen today, be sure to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and drop a review. That's how amplify the voices that need to be heard. And remember, this isn't about fixing yourself. This is about finding yourself again beneath the rubble. Until next time, choose ease, choose power, choose you. This is Survival Mode Disrupted. Let's keep shaking shit up.